Greetings, everybody, and welcome to Conversations with Carp. I'm Steve Carpenter, Sports Information Director at Hutchinson Community College, and your host for this podcast. As we enter our second month without games because of the COVID-19 pandemic, that doesn't mean the work has stopped around the Blue Dragon Athletic Office. In fact, it is always quite busy around here with recruiting and all the stuff that people never get to see behind the scenes. So, Conversations with Carp was created to keep you, the Blue Dragon Nation, in touch with your favorite team and your favorite coaches. And today I am very pleased to be speaking with the head volleyball coach at Hutchinson Community College, Mr. Patrick Hall. Patrick, thanks for taking some time with us.
Oh, absolutely, Steve. Time is something I certainly have these days.
Well, it's one of those unprecedented times. That's probably the best way to put it. But even at that, we've talked with a lot of head coaches about recruiting and how they're handling their current team. They're doing, over Zoom calls, a lot more texting, stuff like that. But in terms of your recruiting, because of the international element that you try to recruit every year, this is nothing new for you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you're dealing with students who are out of the country, you're going to have to spend more time setting up either FaceTime calls or WhatsApp. WhatsApp is, of course, what most international students use. So we do the recruiting primarily through those video conversations with those students and their parents, and we're able to show them around the arena and our superb facilities. And, so that part really hasn't changed much for us, certainly in terms of the international students, but now we do the same thing with all the domestic students. So it's, in that sense, that part of recruiting has been a pretty easy transition.
What about staying in touch with your current team? Obviously, coursework still needs to be continued through this spring semester, and that is in of itself its own priority right now, correct?
Correct. And Coach Provincio is doing most of that work because she had already been doing that prior to spring break when we went to online courses. But obviously I check in with her every week. We go over grades for all of our current students to see where they are. And then also we've been spending a lot of time in the last 2 weeks getting all of our students registered for the fall. And I think we're down to one now, so we're almost finished with that. Beyond that, our students who are still in high school are making their own adjustments to online classes, and I know that's a bit of a struggle for some of them, making that adjustment. But they seem to be getting used to it, and hopefully they're all being successful there as well.
You bet. Well, you've just this past fall completed your 8th season at Hutchinson, a record of 201, 106, just the third head coach in Blue Dragon history to reach 200 wins. Here might be a little unknown fact to you that the very next win you have will be the program's 1,100th in history, and that the program started in 1974. So there's a little bit of trivia that you can start throwing out to people.
Well, Steve, I can always count on you to provide me with some of our program stats and trivia, so I appreciate that. I'm not the best at keeping track of our records, but I can always count on you to come up with something interesting for me. So I appreciate knowing that, and hopefully we make that happen right off the bat this year.
You bet. Last year, a 14-19 record. There were some nice pieces to the team last year. Kaylin Elston had a fantastic year in terms of numbers. It was just a year, though, that there were some early injuries, and the team development just never really happened. Is that a fair assessment?
I'd say that's very fair. I mean, our record speaks for itself this year. I don't really want to make any excuses for our performance, but we weren't able to be consistent. We did have some real bright spots. We had some pretty big wins over some ranked teams. But consistency is the name of the game, and typically our program has moved forward throughout the season, and we've been usually playing our best at the end, and that just we just didn't have that happen. We didn't have that gel factor going this year, so that's something that we look to get back to next season. As a coach, I particularly enjoy that developmental process that you go through every year. You hope to keep that, to not necessarily have the meteoric rise, because that's usually followed by a fairly steep decline at some point. And you have that kind of inconsistency then. So we're hoping to just get back to a real steady progress throughout the season and then peak at the end.
That always was the recipe for success when you took over here before the 2012 season. What's the secret to that? Obviously, you can't hit it every year, just for a myriad of reasons, but you've always had success in terms of setting a baseline and just making a slow build to where you want to get. So what's the secret to your success?
Well, I think if you take that approach, the secret is, and particularly for a program like ours where we focus on technical development, it's getting your players to buy into that system, to commit to that technical development. And I'm not saying our players didn't do that this year, but there were just some other factors that and some of that is injury, of course, but that prevented them from making those kinds of technical developments. But honestly, that's the key, at least in a program like ours. It's buying into accepting that you're going to have to make some changes in your motor patterns, and hopefully that's going. We always talk to our players about, let's make incremental changes instead of looking to improve our hitting from hitting 200 to, next week or next 2 weeks we need to hit 270. Let's just go from 200 to 210, and then we'll worry about getting to 220. And hopefully we can show them the things that they need to do to make those incremental changes. And when they buy into that, we think we've been fairly successful at making that nice, steady progress.
You bet. Well, since basically the year 2000, Blue Dragon Volleyball at that point reasserted itself as one of the top programs in the league and has stayed there ever since. You yourself, over your years, have had some huge wins here, several Region 6 championships, several conference championships. Is there a win or two that might stand out a little more than the others? One does to me. I just want to see if you come up with that win.
Yeah, I bet it's. Yeah, I think. Anybody was certainly like you that's been around our program for a while would pick the win over Seward when they were in the region championship, when they were ranked number 3 in the country.
That would be the one, yes.
and we swept them in 3. I think that was a huge win. It was a lot of fun, the playing in away from home and on Seward's home court with a huge crowd, and are seeing those kids, just taking care of business, not being intimidated, staying within our game plan, and frankly, just flat out executing to pull off that win. And of course, every game, as you know, was close. I think every game was a 2-point game,
mm-hmm.
and winning, I believe, 30-28 in the third. And then just receiving text messages from all over the country from coaches telling me they were tuned into that match, watching it online, and they just kept calling more and more coaches saying, "You've got to see this. Turn this on." That was a lot of fun. Coaches that I don't even really have much connection to, texting me after the match, just saying that was a great match, and it was. It was terrific.
I know our athletic director Josh Gooch was really excited. He still calls that his favorite moment in his 5 years here. And heck, we've got a basketball national championship on that resume over the last 5 years, but he still calls that his favorite singular moment as AD. That's the fun part about it. Playing in those types of games, and not every program gets to do that. So, in terms of how you look at things, how you built your program, and not just here. You had the 1 year at Barton, you had the years at Pratt where you brought that program up. Being able to take a program and raise it 1, 2, even 5 levels as you did down at Pratt, that's got to be a pretty neat thing for a head coach.
It's a lot of fun, but Steve, you know this, working with young people, with college kids, that they bring so much energy and enthusiasm into the gym, really on a daily basis, and then to get to see those kids realize achievement based on what they bring into the gym is what's probably sounds corny, but that's the most gratifying thing. So when you get into one of those hugely dramatic moments like that match, and they happen, not every day in athletics, but they happen certainly every year in one sport or another. You have those incredible dramas that develop, and then they create these sort of just lasting memories and iconic moments that are just a lot of fun. And seeing the kids go through that, their emotion was just off the charts, and then being able to be in that moment with them. Yeah, so it's not something you're experiencing just by yourself. You're experiencing this literally as a team, and so you have that exponential factor involved, and that's what makes it memorable.
Well, I would be remiss if we didn't give a shout out to your assistant coach, Tori Provencio. I may pick on Tori as much as any assistant coach in here. Just Tori is just a great person. Talk about her and her contributions to the program.
She's huge. I'm really extremely fortunate to have her, and to have her be able to come back this past year. She brings so much in terms of her relationship to our players, which is, it's not only very professional, but she has a connection there based on her strong interest in helping young women mature, both academically and athletically and personally. The girls relate to her very well. And she's just somebody that's and she keeps me humble and honest between Coach Pro and my wife, and they're very good friends. The two of them can make sure that that I pretty much stay within the bounds.
She is good at that. What about you, Patrick? You've we've had so many conversations over the years, and we've had a lot of conversations about a wide variety of topics, which means you're very well versed in a lot of things. So where did the love of volleyball come from for Patrick Hall?
I'll tell you, when I first started, there were a couple things. Like many young male athletes, and I was not outstanding by any means. I just played a lot of sports. But, when I first was introduced to volleyball, I was a senior at University of Iowa, and I had a very good friend she was a graduate student in biomechanics, and she had played for the Canadian national team. She went on to be, by the way, a professor of biomechanics at Dalhousie University in Canada. But anyway, she introduced me to volleyball, and I started. She said, "Hey, you really ought to try to get on the university club team." And so I did. I was really bad, but I could jump, So, but anyway, the thing that drew me to the sport was that half the people on the team have to touch the ball every time, or pretty much every time, for you to be successful. And I had played a lot of sports, certainly basketball and even football, believe it or not. But I'd never played a sport where, gosh, everybody talks about team and how important it is. Everybody's on the team is important to success, and that is true in every team sport. But in volleyball, the structure of the game pretty much requires that half the team touch the ball every time. So that was just something that really appealed to me, that the structure of the game would support the primacy of team effort. And then another thing is I got really fortunate. The next year I had moved out to the West Coast and started playing beach. And back then, even in the big tournaments, the open tournaments, you called your own. There was no official. Even, when you were playing the money wasn't great back then, but I thought that was, frankly, pretty cool that you could play in these highly competitive, doubles tournaments, and there was no official. Everybody called their own nets. They called their own ball handling, until, it wasn't too many years later when Miller Lite, I think, came in, was the first sponsor of the AVP Tour. That when the money got big, you had to have officials.
Right.
But I thought that was pretty neat, and it was a smaller community, of course, at that time, up and down the coast, and it was that most people knew each other and that sort of thing. So anyway, that's kind of how I got into the game, and then started coaching fairly soon after that, and went from there.
Well, with my volleyball background, I'm not much of a player, but being a Nebraska fan all these years, that is one sport that I learned pretty early. So it's always enjoyable to go into your office and have a little more deeper conversation about the sport of volleyball with you, because it's not a conversation that everybody can get real deep with. A lot of people think they understand the game, but there is a lot of technical aspects to the game, and I always enjoy speaking to you just on that.
Well, Steve, I have to say that we are extremely fortunate to have you. It's pretty rare to have an SID that has an understanding of volleyball the way you do, and certainly for you to, far more about Nebraska volleyball than I will ever know. But your enthusiasm and knowledge for the game is pretty much unparalleled. So we're pretty lucky, and to have somebody who can actually sit there and announce the game during a webcast and actually know what they're talking about is pretty rare. There's not just somebody calling out the numbers and saying where the setter is from. It's somebody actually describing the game accurately the way it's taking place. So that's pretty nice for us. It's a really nice bonus, and I appreciate that fact, even though I know we take you for granted sometimes. But we add to your workload just like everybody else.
Oh, not to worry. Patrick, thanks for taking some time with us today, and when August gets here, I hope we're going, so that's something to look forward to. Again, thanks for taking some time.
You bet, Steve, and thank you.
That was Blue Dragon head volleyball coach Patrick Hall, and that'll wrap up another episode of Conversations with Carp. We'll talk to you again soon. So long, everybody.